on this episode of the Mad Rush podcast.
When I went to interview with Microsoft, I didn't really know what it was, to be honest. Like they had just launched like Windows 95 and I wanted to do marketing. And they basically said, you don't have an MBA. And they said, what are you good at? I go, people. And that's how I became a recruiter. And so then they just said, do you want to travel? I said, sure. And then I hit the road and I was a college recruiter. And that's when, once you see hundreds and hundreds of campuses, that's when you start to be like, wow, where I went to school was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But you also see another side, like then you go to like a school that you thought of as just a party school, but you see their computer science department and you're like, wow, or like Georgia School of Business. I'm like, never would have thought that was great, but it is.
Welcome to the Mad Rush podcast. I'm Trisha Addix, the original sorority rush consultant. While the stories I have to share are nothing short of astonishing, this podcast goes beyond the wild client tales and sorority life. I'll be engaging with fascinating guests from both within and outside the Greek world, uncovering the surprising connections that bind us all together. Join me for a journey that's as entertaining as it is enlightening. Welcome to Mad Rush. You guys are in for a treat today. My close friend, Brooke Lowry, is here, and we are getting into it all. So welcome, Brooke. Thank you so much for joining me on Mad Rush. My cheeks already hurt from laughing just from our emails about today.
I know. We have so much to cover. I'm very excited to be here. And who knew that 30 years later, we would have these certain topics on our sheets.
Yeah, exactly. So she said 30 years later. So I first met Brooke at...
Maybe more.
Oh, God, yeah, it was more. Shit. It was like...
like 35, 36.
No, it was 40 years ago we met. Mm-hmm. Yeah, do the math. Okay, so 40...
I don't want to do the math. I'll trust
40
you.
years ago, I met Brooke at the beach, and she has always been the coolest, most fun girl that is ever in your hemisphere. And I have been grateful for that. She's been in my corner for 40 freaking years. Okay. So first, I noticed on your resume that you sent me that your interests include chips and queso. And yes, this is on her professional resume, y'all. And as you guys know, this podcast is all about connections. And that is a very strong connection that we have. Chips and queso are very much of interest to me also. Brooke lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, and now lives close to my friends, the Schlernitzours. Les and Megan were on this podcast a few weeks ago talking about Megan's journey from LSU to College of Charleston. But that's a connection too, Charlotte.
Yep.
And
the chips and queso is very important because I think that it follows you wherever you go. And not being able to find the good white cheese dip, I mean, that can put a city back beyond. I mean, I think they're still looking for it in New York.
Oh, yeah, they are.
In case somebody report back if they found it. But when my little guy was born, we joked that he came out saying, "Welcome to Moe's." Because, I mean, every other day I was getting my fix.
Yeah, it's a thing. And my friend, it's our mutual friend. I'm not going to use her name because I'm going to kind of dog her a little bit, but she'll know it. But she has a very hard time describing stuff. And it's very funny to me. Like she was telling me about this beautiful brass chandelier or something. And it was the way she described it, it sounded horrible. And then it was like this gorgeous, like brushed gold chandelier. And I was like, dude, like you can't describe it. So anyway, she kept talking about this new thing that she had discovered. She lives in Nashville. And so we went to lunch and I was visiting her. And she's like, I'm going to go to the restroom, but when I get back, I'm going to introduce you to this thing. And it's a bean dip that is just amazing. And I thought that was weird because she eats like a 12-year-old, like no beans are in her hemisphere. And she gets back and she orders freaking queso. I'm like, where have you been? Like forever. But she
Was this at Satco?
yes,
Like the original
yes,
queso? I mean,
yeah. And she was
come on.
calling it a bean dip. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not a bean dip. That's queso.
No.
And I don't know where you're going with that. But yeah, I think it's important to note again that chips and queso are on Brooke's professional resume. And it would make me want to hire her, even though she's not looking for a job. But she's not looking for a job because she is a successful human resources executive who does consulting. But for our purposes, she's a blogger and a writer. And we'll get more into her current projects. But first, let's talk college and sorority life. So again, I met Brooke.
Or lack thereof.
Yes. So I met Brooke in the 80s. And so tell us about tell us about you.
My journey.
Your journey. I was going to say journey. And then I was like, God, I so overused that.
Remember I worked at HR. So I used to actually say that to people. And I'm so sorry for those hundreds of thousands of people that I asked you about. Your journey.
I know. Can we take a minute? Can you give me another word? Because I cringe every time I say it on this podcast.
You could say your story or your history. Walk me through your life.
I'm writing this down. Walk me through your life. I like that because
then that could take a long time. You gotta. If they're not succinct, you could be.
Well, it's not going to take so long with you because we have to cut out so much of the stuff that's incriminating. Yes. So it's like,
okay, it's the short version. Yeah. I grew up in Atlanta, Westminster Wildcat, class of '88, and I was lucky.
And another connection: my husband was Westminster Wildcat, class of 1986. So we are That's 2 years older than you. All right,
go, Greg.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and I was lucky enough that my parents really enjoyed going to St. Simon's and Sea Island, and they took me with them. And sometimes they didn't, and I just went by myself. So I spent probably more time there than I should and just happened to run into Trisha while we were probably at church. I feel certain that was it. Or we were exercising, things we did probably all the time. It's so funny in reflecting about this and the questions that you said, here are some things to kind of, jog your memory. I think at 18, because I didn't really know who I was yet, I was very concerned with being cool. But
you were,
that was about it.
You were innately cool. So I don't know why you were concerned with it, but go ahead.
And I thought, well, what can I do that's really different? And I don't think I realized what a big decision this was, but I decided I am going to school above the Mason-Dixon line. But in that decision, I was smart enough to realize I wasn't smart enough to go to school.
I was going to say nothing over the Mason-Dixon line in the East Coast could you have gotten into. So don't kid yourself.
No. But with my, I think I was at the time, I was one of two, but I was like, I like to ski. And so we always went to Colorado for spring break because I was spoiled. And so I was like, let's go look at Boulder. So it was the prettiest campus I've ever seen. Still to this day.
Yeah, it's
Drop
gorgeous.
Dead, gorgeous. I mean, you're in the Flatirons looking up at the mountains. It couldn't be any prettier. And so I come back and I said, this is where I'm going to school. And lo and behold, they let me in. So I will never forget that the college counselor at the time, who was also maybe dean of the upper school or something at Westminster, called in my parents. And this is my mom and my stepdad. And my stepdad was pretty outspoken and he was kind of irked he had to be there anyway. So he's like, I wonder what this guy is going to say. And, they very nicely said, look, you've paid a lot of money for Brooke to go to school here and you're sending her to ski and smoke pot. And I've never been so proud of my mom because she just was like, excuse me, sir, have you been to Athens? Because I'm pretty sure the drugs are everywhere. That didn't go very well. They still were firmly rooted in we don't support this decision. Now, and the reality is I think they were short-sighting Colorado at the time. I mean, it even now it's a very good school. It was a good school then.
Right.
I mean, I ended up getting a great education.
My brother graduated from Emory, where he had a scholarship. and he went to law school at Boulder. And
He did?
I
Okay.
will never forget at his law school graduation. I was drinking a beer or something in a can. Could have been Diet Coke. I don't know. Tab. And I was looking for a place to throw it away. And
Oh, Miss Tab.
and me too. And this girl comes up to me. She goes, it's Colorado. We recycle here. I was like, okay, well, I'm not saying I want to kill the environment. I just want to find a place to deposit my can. But anyway, Boulder is gorgeous. But so anyway, we're walking through your life.
Memory lane.
So
I mean, I went kind of on I don't want to say a lark, but I don't know if it was really a fully thought through decision. And I remember getting there and thinking, wow, this is not, and because my comparison was Athens, and being that my dad was, had red and black blood, and I went to every home game since I was 2.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I had been to Clemson, Auburn, Alabama, only SEC schools, and also was taught to hate all of them except Georgia. So, I forgot about this. My dad, this is my real dad, not my stepdad, but they actually both went to Georgia. But my real dad, when he found out that I wasn't going to Georgia, because to him, why wouldn't you? He didn't pay my tuition for like a year and a half or something. It was great, but he recarpeted the Chi-Fi house.
Okay, that is hilarious. See,
that's what he did with my tuition. That's how pleased he was that I went away.
That is crazy. Yeah, my grandfather, when I chose to go to Georgia, totally different, but he was a big tech guy, and he didn't speak to me for a very long time. Yeah, he was, could have been like a week. I don't know, but he was.
He got recovered from that.
Yeah, he was pretty pissed, but that's hilarious. He carpeted he was the Chi-Fi there?
Oh yeah.
That's what Greg
Snake.
was.
You didn't mess with Snake.
Okay.
He'll know Snake.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I'll never forget though, when he finally came to Boulder to visit, and it was like well into sophomore year, we go into the student section and my dad's like, they serve beer in the stadium? I go, oh yeah. He was like, all right.
Wait, they served beer in the 80s in the stadium?
They still do.
Well, I know they do now, but I didn't realize. Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, yeah. They actually, by the time we left, we could look at pictures at Boulder. They literally built a cage around the student section.
Okay, they needed it after this. Brooke and I are recording on the Tuesday after the Texas Georgia game where they threw freaking water bottles on the field. And that was, we could get into, I could talk about that all day. That was absurd.
Targeting.
Yeah.
There were a lot of things.
Yeah, there were a lot. Yes. Okay.
Shockingly, this is not a sports show. But
as I pretend like
Trisha and Brooke break it down. We could be like the two guys from In Living Color.
Yeah.
That's aging us.
Yeah, that's aging us. Don't say that again. Okay, so you choose Colorado, as my brother corrects me. It's not Colorado. And what happened?
So, like I said, as soon as you get there, like it's even like unpacking your stuff in your dorm room. Like I've got my Laura Ashley bedspread, and like everybody else is kind of Patagonia. And it was, but you're still like, you could still, it was really easy to fake ID. Like everybody's like drinking beers in the dorm, and you can like walk, it was different in good and bad ways. So it was kind of like I was enthralled by how different it was, but I would just have these moments of like, everybody else is like, I know they're in Brumby or they're wherever. Like I knew those were such known entities to me.
Brumby is a dorm in Athens, if you're listening.
Yeah, thank you. And so, this little piece of me was always like, oh, I must be missing out on something. But
thank God there wasn't social media.
That could be a whole nother episode on how I felt through this whole thing. But I remember like there was no question that I was going through Rush, but I just thought that Rush at Colorado in 1988 would just be like Rush at Georgia or Rush at where all my other friends, Chapel Hill. Like it was going to be the same thing.
Wait, Brooke, you
So
froze.
when
You
we
froze. Say that sentence
wait,
again.
I missed you.
Brooke,
I did.
you froze after you assumed
Okay.
Rush. So say that whole thing again. You just assumed Rush at Colorado.
So I just assumed that when I got to Boulder, that Rush would be just like it was at Georgia or Chapel Hill or all the other SEC schools I had, heard or seen about Rush happening. Because you would hear from people's older siblings, about pref night and all these little terms. But in my mind, it was always the way it was in the South, right? Like I don't think I'd prepared myself for the differences. And I mean, I have got the Ann Taylor, like kind of skirt suit with the shoulder pads, if you're remembering this.
Yes.
You're up here. And maybe some good Talbot's numbers. What else? I do believe I had like a little something from Harold's.
Oh, Harold's.
Remember Harold's in the ATL?
I have a friend whose dog was named Harold because she was so obsessed with that store.
So, and every girl I met, except for like one or two in my dorm, were all going through Rush. And I thought this was so cool because I was the only person in our whole dorm from Atlanta. And so we meet with the counselor or whatever, and it all comes crashing down the first night when we all meet like in the lobby of our dorm to like go out to the first night of parties. And they've all got on like sundresses. And most of these girls, this is a mix of everything from Seattle, all across California, Chicago, Minneapolis. But they obviously had gotten a different memo than I had.
It's so true. And it's true now too. Go ahead.
Now we know, stuff is so well known, but like whatever was hip in California that summer, I'm just going to say juicy couture, but that's probably not right. But they were just dressed, and they all, by the way, had blonde hair. I did not. I had big brown, it was a lot of hair. And
I can attest to that.
I remember thinking, oops, like that was my first internal, like something is awry, something is not right at the Circle K. And that is a line from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Which is also dating us.
To age us.
Continue.
Yes. So we go to that first, and I remember like at first, like when they give you the list of where we were going, the second house was Delta Gamma. Now, nowadays, and you can correct me because I don't know, I think that is become a much more common house in the SEC. But when we were growing up, if schools had Delta Gamma, it was small and it wasn't where people were like longing to be a part of. Like I had literally never heard of DG in 1988. And I'm thinking like, oh, this be interesting. Like I'll meet, but no. This is the biggest, nicest house on campus. It is where every single person I walk in with is a legacy or has a girl from a high school that's older that's there, or a friend of a friend of a friend. I didn't even have a rec for DG. I never even heard of it. And I actually checked my memory there was another girl from Marist that was not in my dorm, but was at Boulder, and we were in Rush together, and we were together that night. And I can't remember, was it the DG house or the Kappa house? And these girls from California, very nice. And it's not because they weren't smart, but you just think about, you don't know now, you know then. I mean, they really asked us, like, do you know Jimmy Carter? Like, do you guys grow peanuts? And this one girl, like, it's like, I know this is kind of a touchy subject, but did your grandparents own slaves?
Oh, wow.
And I mean, she and I were just like, wowzer. And it's like, you don't, and I didn't want to laugh at it because I didn't think it was a funny question, but then I didn't want to offend them. And it was like, I was totally unprepared how to navigate small talk.
Wow.
Like that.
Yeah.
And so long and short of it was, so that was the first night. By the third, I forgot to tell you this little piece. So my mom, who went to FSU, was president of Tridel when her junior year, and continued to be very involved. And like, I think the year I went to college, she had literally just rolled off like the national board.
Oh, wow.
Or like within a few years. Like, to say she was involved would be an understatement. So if you talk about like, I was a shoe-in, the number of recs I had for Tridel. So I get to the Tridel house. These are not my people. And I was like, and it was just like, oh shit. Like, talk about, it's so interesting that my career ended up being like being able to read the room and tailor messages and communications is such a huge part of what I did at Microsoft. And now I think back on it, and like, I had none of those skills going through Rush. And I was just like, oh shit.
So did you just read it on your face that you were not having tried out?
And I think too, it was like just a game. I felt like I was playing a game that like I got different rules than everybody else did.
Yeah.
Right.
I get it.
And anyway, by the third night, I mean, DG dropped me like that. And so I already know, like, I'm not going to invite it back to the best house. So by pref night, I was invited to 3 houses. And the first one was Kappa. And that was the one where actually there were girls from Atlanta in the house. Not that I knew, but at least I knew they had some Southern girls. And I could just tell the way they were acting, like that, like I wasn't going to get invited back.
Oh, wow.
So I walked out of Kappa and I didn't go to my other 2 parties.
Oh, wow.
So, and I was actually just talking to my therapist about this, because I think this was at 18, like the only way I knew to protect myself from this whole group of people rejecting me was, I'm too cool for this.
Right.
I'm done. I'm out of here. And so, who knows if I would have gone to those other 2 pref parties, like how different of an experience it had been. Was
tried out one of them?
You know what? I can't remember. I think I was probably so not nice that first night, because I was just like, what is happening? But they probably had to, because of my Rex, at least invite me. So probably, I do remember when I called home to say I dropped out of Rush. And that was the term I used, because technically I did. And it made me feel better that there was no way you could say that I didn't get a bid because I didn't go to all my parties, right? Like I could have. And somebody we know, who I'll tell you later, like their mom called my mom, and literally it was like somebody had died. They offered her condolences.
Oh yeah. I
like, because how in the world were you going to get through college without being in a sorority?
So you dropped out, but mentally, because I see this so much and I get calls every single day from people who have either dropped out or been whatever. But at Colorado in the 80s, was that as defining as it is did it feel as defining as it does to these people whose calls I get?
No, because then, and I mean, again, we would have to check the exact stats.
I probably have
My
those.
gut is, yeah, okay, we could look. But I think at that time, probably the school was maybe 20% Greek. And I already could tell just a week in that it didn't matter that much.
Right.
Because of all of our friends in our dorm that we've been hanging out with for a couple of weeks, and all the parties you were going to.
And you were going to every single one.
Yeah, we went to a lot. And it didn't matter. And luckily for me, it did work out that way.
Right.
Like in the fact that I had friends that were independents. I had a lot of friends that were in different houses. But at Boulder, at least back then, it was so open. And I know you've talked about standards before, and like all the rules and regulations that different sororities have. But like, I would go to like a Pi Phi SAE mixer, and the next morning I would go to the Pi Phi house with my friends and have breakfast with them and look at the Zap photos from the night before.
Wow,
like
yeah.
There's like, oh, Brooke's coming,
Right.
And I mean, I think that, I got kicked out of chapter meetings, obviously.
They're like, go back to the dorm and smoke the good pot.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was, Lord, it was really hard to find pictures that, I mean, the fact that we were all still smoking cigarettes inside.
And
But
in
anyway,
Colorado.
yeah, yeah,
So
Colorado.
the difference, there's so many things. Well, one, it's the 80s. And so all of that stuff is different. But I think it's because, and I think it probably affected you, as you said, but because it was your choice and you are who you are. I mean, y'all, Brooke is a cool person. Like she said, it was very important to her, but like it was very innate. I can imagine that at Colorado, that kind of made you elevated a little bit in status too, just because people are like, she doesn't need this, you know? I'm sure, I mean, I know you're not probably not going to admit that, but I think I see that. I think that it is rare when someone can take that and still have the social and the diverse group of friends and all that without some serious effort. I mean, it can be done for sure, but it's a way. Sorority is a way to find your people, and you easily do that regardless of where you are. So I'm sure that did not affect, and it didn't hurt. It would have been a completely different situation if you were at Georgia.
Yeah.
And so, you could also, but was that weird for you when you came back to Atlanta to say you were not in a sorority? She's
But
nodding.
I think I'm really good about, yes, I'm not. Thank you.
I'm interpreting.
Really
I'm doing
good.
Brooke interpretation over here.
Again, preparing myself for my future career. I think, I had talking points for my audience, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, we ski Tuesday and Thursday. I mean, all of these were true,
Right.
but I'm sure some of it was me because I had two other close friends that did not get a bid.
At
And
Colorado or
yes,
else?
at Colorado.
Okay.
Yes. So for the rest of freshman year, even though all our friends that were in sororities, there was still a good number of us that weren't. Now, what's interesting is two of the like five of us that were not in sororities did rush sophomore year
Did you rush?
and got into
Yeah.
got into the houses they wanted to get into, but we all still lived together because as the other thing at Boulder, even then, I think all schools suffer from this, but like there's just not room in the house for everybody.
Right.
And so we all lived together sophomore, junior, senior year in some capacity or another. We're in the same apartment complexes,
Gotcha.
so we were all always together. But yes, when I would come home and everybody would talk about, Doc Banks or,
Which is an
and especially
SAE party.
because, yes, and especially because I knew so many of the people, be it the girls or the boys, and everything they were doing at Georgia or at Chapel Hill was so Greek focused. And I was like, well, I skied the back Vale Bowls, so there.
Well, yeah, and so because you grew up like one of the ways that I grew up in Charlotte, and I didn't have any exposure to any of it. Like, but you knew what it was like at Georgia. You lived it. You were Atlanta, and so like I didn't know what I didn't know, but I can't imagine coming home and that's what you've known your whole life. Your mom was, so active and tried out. I imagine that was really tough for you. So let's fast forward to, so you have a great non-Greek college life, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you have friends in all different sororities. How do you think that shaped you? One, I would like to point out so many people, it's so important to so many people when you're a freshman or maybe when you're a sophomore on the other side of Rush, but it kind of peters out for a lot of people, the importance of Greek life. It's such a great way to make connections, but then, you evolve hopefully and have everybody, have friends from classes or your major or whatever. But still, that's a foundation. And you didn't have that foundation while you did have the social part and the good friends. How do you think that affected, like, or if it may not have, but how do you think that affected you, your life, and like what you're doing now? Because I'll say one more thing. I've had people on this podcast who, being in Greek life, has completely shaped their career path and the connections that they made in Greek life. So she was in my sorority, so I'm going to give her an interview, kind of thing. So you did not have that. I mean, I'm speaking to the audience now. She's super successful. So I'm wondering how you think that affected it, if anything.
I think it actually, so a couple things. Like I think about like in going through pictures and trying to jog my memory for this conversation. It was interesting because I was like, oh, that was the Pi-Fi wedding, or look, oh, that was the DG girl beach trip, or and it's funny because there were like a couple spring breaks where I was like, oh, that's Cameron and myself and like two other independents. So I was like, oh, that must have been when they all went on some other spring break and we did our own thing.
Right.
And then like, after college, like, it really was like almost like my dorm friends. And then like, because I know this will shock you, but I had a boyfriend in college. And so his friends and who they dated that were all different sororities. And of course he was in the best fraternity. So like we all hung out together. And so that kind of became the social group. And I just went to Boulder last weekend. And just a side note, let's go Prime. Dion is bringing back the Buffs.
Love it.
Now they did not win the game I watched, but just being with this group of friends.
The atmosphere, I'm going to interject. Say what you want to about Dion, but he has just electrified. I feel like Lane Kiffin did that at Ole Miss too. So I'm not talking about anything personally about them or about football, just the energy. It's just,
I don't see Lane getting 50 Cent and LL Cool J on the side.
Well, that's true. He does have Juice the dog. So there's that.
There's that. We're walking through this field to go to the game where now they officially tailgate. That's the other thing. Like there really is not tailgating out. It's just not like it is in the South, but now there's like a designated field with tents, which kind of cracks me. No cars, kind of cracks me up.
Oh, that is funny.
But all of a sudden somebody goes, Rasnick. And I'm like, oh my God.
That's her maiden name.
And that's just like, and see, that's how Snake became Snake at Pi-Fi. Was from that.
Makes sense.
So somebody knew that at Boulder, so they all just started. Well, and I had another friend named Brooke. And so every time you said Brooke, we both turned around. And then we were blonde Brooke and brown Brooke. And then we started coloring our hair and that became a mess. But it was like, and again, it was somebody that was like in a random fraternity that I knew because they dated a girl, that was a Chi-O in my dorm.
Right.
So I think that I really do feel so lucky of the friends I made in college. And But let me add this little piece to it too. Last weekend, as we're walking around campus, we go to the DG house and there's 6 of us, 4 of the group were DGs. And they're like, oh my gosh, remember we were here. And so we're inside the house for like 30 minutes and they're talking to like some of the girls who are like stumbling out of their rooms. And, it dawns on me, they had a whole other life.
Oh, wow.
At college that I didn't. And it wasn't like, it didn't like make me sad. And it wasn't that but it's just, and this is again, my HR talk, but it's in and out group. Like I was excluded from that. I was not, I didn't have the code to that door, they could invite me over, but I didn't have a bed on that hall. Right. Like,
yeah.
So, and that was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting to think about.
I was like, I made out on that fire escape at the Kappa Steakhouse. I want that to be noted.
Please note that.
So, it's interesting. And I think a lot about if I had finished Rush, who knows? What if I had gotten a bid from Tried Out where I didn't really think I fit and it ended up really being a group of people that I clicked with? Or what if I did get a bid from Kappa And then I would have definitely been in a pledge class with girls I was automatically friends with.
Right.
It's hard to know. And I mean, I'm lucky, but again, I think that I kind of did it because I did it on purpose. When I left Atlanta, I'm trying to think. When I went to interview with Microsoft, I didn't really know what it was, to be honest. Like they had just launched like Windows 95. And I wanted to do marketing. And they basically said, you don't have an MBA. And they said, what are you good at? I go, people. And that's how I became a recruiter. And so then they just said, do you want to travel? I said, sure. And then I hit the road and I was a college recruiter. And that's when, once you see hundreds and hundreds of campuses, that's when you start to be like, wow, where I went to school was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But you also see another side, like then you go to like a school that you thought of as just a party school, but you see their computer science department and you're like, wow, or like Georgia School of Business. I'm like, never would have thought that was great, but it is.
It's hard to have a perspective too on that stuff. I was talking to a client who is at an Ivy, which just this past week, and we were FaceTiming and I'm looking at her school behind her. She was in her car because we were having a pretty intense conversation. And I'm looking at the school behind her and I'm just like, this is a big freaking world. And like looking at her school and this microcosm of Greek life, which was so important to her, it was during Rush. And I was like, wow, like, I think I'm just getting a little deep here, but I feel like my focus, because I am so focused on helping people achieve their Greek life goals or whatever. But like, there is a lot of really cool stuff that you can do in college. And I say that all the time, but I think I didn't really think about it in those terms as much until I saw this beautiful campus behind her and this, diverse, group of students that's walking by. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool that that's out there too. So I get that. But yeah.
I was just going to say, if I had mentioned in my interview at Microsoft, like, let's just say I was in a sorority. Like, let's just say I was a Kappa from Auburn or whatever it might be. One, they probably would have never heard of they would have heard of an SEC school, but would never have thought that anybody that had a brain could go there. Because at that time, all they hired were Ivy League and you had to have an MBA or like top of your class in computer science. So first of all, they wouldn't have like acknowledged the school and, they didn't care. I mean, I do remember when I was interviewing kids coming in, I remember some of the senior people at the time who had gone to like Yale, Princeton, Harvard, Stanford, asking people what eating house they were in, and that was the first time I had heard that. But they could, if you had the fraternity sorority thing, now that might be different now that it's 200,000 people, but in 1996, they did not. That would not have been a selling point or a networking point at all.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which is just kind of interesting.
Yeah. And I think it has changed. I mean, so much has changed. I mean, so much of the things that we've even said in this conversation are like, it's a completely different world now. But yeah, I think it's a good networking thing, but it's interesting that it didn't affect you in any way at all for your interview. So you worked at Microsoft for how long?
23 years.
Wow. That also is dating you. So I'm not going to do that to you. So if you're listening, we're digressing from the Greek life thing, meaning like just that part of the conversation, because I don't think this has anything to do with where you are sitting right now, but she is doing something really cool and I'm really excited about it. And I want her to tell you about it.
So my goal was to leave Microsoft at 25 years. I was trying to say till like that was the marker I had in my mind.
You wanted a gold watch.
You got like a huge crystal thing or something. I don't know what it was. I probably would have thrown it away anyway, but I wanted it. I wanted the prize.
Right.
But I got to a point where, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of travel. And that little angelic fella I had, kind of later in life. He was 5, maybe 6. But this is pre-COVID. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to retire. Oh, and I started writing my blog. So quickly should say that in 2017, as we already talked about the love of chips and queso, I decided to do the Whole30.
I loved reading your blog. That was so, going through the Whole30 with Brooke was hysterical. I remember wheat thins was a big thing that you missed.
I mean, see my wheat thin behind me, keep calm and eat wheat thins.
Oh, yeah.
I can't, that yellow thing.
I see it.
And then that's my cloister one.
Oh, yeah.
Up there in the corner. That's the old matchbook cover. Anyhow, so I thought it's a month. Like, I can do this, but y'all, cheese and I have a very, very intimate relationship. And so just the dairy and then no alcohol, I can deal without the sugar, no carbs. It was just brutal. And but once you get past like week 2, you're like, I'm finishing this. But so what I started doing was I was writing every day on Facebook, 1, because it was like an outlet, and 2, it kept me, accountable to people. Folks found that funny. So then I took that and actually made a blog called True Grit. And I didn't, of course, pay enough money for .com. So it's truegrit.biz, which still makes me laugh. I might never change it just because of that. But anyway, when I left Microsoft, my plan was that I was going to take the blog and my general crazy life experience and write a book. And I think I decided in December 2019 that I was April 1st, 2020 was going to be my last day. So, I mean, I was flying to Seattle. It's going to have this big retirement party. Like, I had big plans. And no, we went on spring break with the kids and never left because of COVID. So I had my retirement party over Zoom with like a glass of champagne. I was like,
cheers.
It was the most
So wait, where were you on spring break when this happened?
My in-laws have a house in Hilton Head, which is basically their retirement plan. And so they were supposed to come down the week after we left. We just never left because it had great Wi-Fi. And in South Carolina, they didn't put the mask on till like August.
So you're just kicking it at the beach with the Wi-Fi.
With the Wi-Fi, and Henry was finishing up kindergarten, so he had like an hour of YouTube a day, and then we had marine biology on the beach, which usually included a frozen cocktail, but he liked it. So anyway, then as the book writing slowly took on, then I decided to renovate the house because then that would delay having to be accountable to something. Anyway, so recently I have just recommitted myself to writing. So I'm on Substack.
Which the goal for me today is to find out what the hell Substack is. You said that and I was like, I don't know what Substack is, but I waited to hear with you guys, but you all probably know. But
it is just a platform for, everybody uses different terms, but for blogs, newsletters, just posts, if you will. I started writing every week and then I thought, people would find me tiresome. So now I'm down to once a month. So I'm about to write about friendship. So this conversation was very timely.
Tell me how to find Substack and like, how do I find yours? I can't believe I didn't know this.
Yes.
I would have, of course, supported it, and I will be posting about it and reposting and all that stuff. But so tell me, is it True Grit on Substack? What is it called?
No, if you go to substack.com and just search
I'm writing this down.
Lowry. Or if you go to my Instagram profile, you can just click on a link and it'll take you there.
And what is your Instagram profile?
Brooke Lowry Official.
So spell that.
BROOKE _ LOWRY _
Gotcha. And her husband's name is Doug, and one of my best friends, I call him Fresh, Dougie Fresh, but I did not know that. I thought I made it up. Actually, I thought his daughter made it up. And then I started seeing that I didn't know that there was an actual...
Do the Dougie?
Yeah, I didn't know any of that. I was like so uniquely calling my friend Doug McGinnity Dougie Fresh. And now I just call him Fresh, but I did not know that I didn't make that up. So that's a little disappointing. And speaking of finding on the internet, I am looking at you right now and you have on Erin
Oh, my
McDermott.
Erin McDermott
Yeah.
stacks. So, yes, these top two are from her. And she just, y'all, is the best combinations of toggle necklaces, beads, earrings, even both my earrings are hers.
She's a
This
Charlotte
bottom
based
one is
designer.
also, yes. And then my bottom ones, these are also based in Charlotte. I mean, different designers, but these are from Tiny Gods,
Oh, cool.
which if you've been in there, it's on Crescent. It's this beautiful store and they have lots of different stuff, but lots of different designers. But these two in my earrings are Erin, and we love her.
Yeah, she's awesome. I met her, Megan Schlarnett-Sauer, who was on this podcast as we discussed. Anyway, she works for Erin. And so I met her. I met Erin at Sea Island and her husband recently. And she was there. And I was like,
Oh,
I saw
fun.
her. I was like, wait, I think you look really familiar. And then we made the connection. I was like, oh my God, you're Megan's.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, it is.
It is a small,
It really
small
is.
world.
It really is. Well, I'm excited to, do I subscribe to Substack? Is that what I do?
Yeah, well, yes. And then that means that every time I have a post, you can get an email.
Okay.
And I'm still free, but we need more people to jump on board so we can charge. And then, I can live out my dream on the Amalfi Coast at some point.
I'm going with you, along with every single person I know posts that they're on the freaking Amalfi Coast, including, I've discussed this before on this podcast, 18-year-olds. And they're like living their best life, drinking Aperol Spritz, I'm like, wait.
They have to wait. Like, what are they going to do when they're 50?
I don't know, but we looked at
I feel very...
Yeah, we looked at a school here when our kids were little. I'm not going to say the school, but Greg and I walked out of the school and they had a cappuccino maker in the library, and it was an elementary school, and it did not go all the way to high school. And Greg and I looked at each other and we're like, yeah, if we start them there, like what, there's no way that they're ever going to be satisfied with anything else. I'm not saying the people that go there aren't, but anyway, I was like, wow. So yes, I'm with you kind of. I'm like, all right, I have not been to the Amalfi Coast and I'm 56 years old.
I mean, I'm spoiled. I have had the privilege and the luck to go a lot of places in the world, but it's just, I joke about like, I need to figure out how to monetize my hobby.
Yeah.
But
yes, and you will, because you're hilarious, and I've loved your writing. I'm sorry that I'm just now discovering Substack, but I'm all in. All right, so we have to do, before we end, we have to do the last thing that we always do.
Oh, yes.
So Bama Rush Talk popularized the hashtag OOTD, outfit of the day, for Mad Rush. I am repurposing hashtag OOTD.
Oh, you don't want my outfit?
I actually do. I was going to ask you, her shirt is super cool. What kind of shirt is that?
No, it is. Okay, I have on my slippers, so don't judge, but it's a Veronica Beard
it's good.
denim jumpsuit.
Oh, it's good.
I like it.
Yeah, it's good. So what is your observation of the day now that we know your outfit of the day?
Yes. So this is something that I'm so proud of that has finally rubbed off on my children. Hashtag never pass up the opportunity to see live music.
Oh, yeah.
I have always been a music lover. And I think I just went through some time where I didn't prioritize it, or you balk at like, oh, I don't want to be tired, or the ticket prices are too high. So in the past month, I've seen Jason Isbell, Post Malone, Nathaniel Rateliff, Morgan Wallen.
Wow.
All incredible shows. And then I'm going to Atlanta Thursday to see Sturgill Simpson, and then Tedeschi Trucks in like a month.
Wow.
They're coming here.
That's awesome.
And it's just like, it just connects you to others. It connects you, I think, more to yourself. There's just something about that experience that is just soul fulfilling. And I hate when people are like, oh, all these excuses to not do it. And even if it's not somebody you love, like, it can still just be, I don't know. I just, the older I get,
I'm buying into that. Yeah.
The more, and it's just, your concert with all the Toby Keith and the Toby Keith tributes, like even that in and of itself, like, it moves you in a whole nother way.
Oh yeah. And then we went to see Darius Rucker and Hootie and the Blowfish a few weeks ago. And just and Edwin McCain opened for him. And I remember being at Chastain and seeing Edwin McCain and Darius Rucker. Like it invokes so much goodness. So I think that's an amazing observation of the day. Go see live music if you can. If you have to sit up, like my husband grew up near Chastain, and Chastain is an amphitheater here in Atlanta, if you're not familiar with it. And he would sit outside of the park because you could still hear it. And that was free. So besides the, whatever kind of natty light
I
they were
saw
drinking.
Willie there, Jimmy Buffett, James Taylor, Indigo Girls.
That's the perfect place to see Indigo Girls or James Taylor, for sure. That's that vibe. Mm-hmm. I loved it. Well, yes, I'm excited to go subscribe. I think that's the right word, to your I was about to say podcast, Substack. And if you guys are listening, it's a treat. She's covering all of the topics, and she's hilarious and also very, I don't know if deep's not the right word, but thoughtful. You're very thoughtful. And I think I think that everyone going to your Substack will learn something. So, and that's the name of the game. So thank you for being here. Go give give the dictator a hug for me, and
I will. He's so sweet.
Give your neighbors a hug for me, since I don't get to see any of y'all as much as I want to. But thank you for being on Mad Rush. I really, really, really appreciate it. And you're going to come back soon.
Thank you for having me. Oh, yes, we will. Yes, we might, both of us, once we get into it.
Absolutely. Welcome to Time Out with Trisha. Because can you really give advice if you don't speak about yourself in the third person? I don't think so. This is exactly how I speak to my clients. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. Now let's get into it. I recently reposted a video on Instagram showing how easy it is for drinks to be spiked at a bar or a party. It was shocking to me, and even more shocking was the reality that the need for this video exists. I'm not an expert on this, and I only know of one person to whom this has happened personally, but the lesson is the same. Besides not drinking a drink after it has been out of your sight, the lesson I'm referring to is be the person people can trust in any situation. If you're out with friends or sorority sisters, keep your wits about you. I went out a couple years ago to Johnny's Hideaway in Buckhead with some friends. While I was dancing, I looked over at our table and my friend Amy was holding all of our purses and staring at our drinks. Be like Amy. If you want to be dancing and not watching the drinks, surround yourself with Amy's who have your back. And that's it for Time Out with Trisha. We'll see you on another episode of the Mad Rush Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Mad Rush Podcast. If you are enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. For additional Rush tips, updates, and more, please follow me on Instagram at Rush with Confidence. If you would like to reach out to us, or for more information, please email info@madrushpod.com. This podcast is produced by Collier Landry and Don't Touch My Radio. Copyright Trisha Adams.